So if we open up our application controller, we see our class for application controller, we're requiring our environment, and we're requiring a sample model. I'm actually going to change this name, but for now, this is fine for the time being. We're also configuring our public folder and our views to be set up inside the views folder and the public folder respectively. And we have our only route currently is the route for our home page, which is get/, which means if you go to the youtube.com, that's the index page. That's the home page. In this case, the route is just the home page right there. And if you want to go into a full URL, you also have the protocol, the domain, the resource, which is a little more complicated, which we can go into later on. But all you really need to know right now is that we're going to be getting a home route, which is going to render our ERB index page. And so far, we have nothing else. Now, before I actually teach you anything about how to structure an MVC style app, let's open up our index.erb. And I would like all of you to now create, I would like you to create an application homepage here with the proper head and body for an index page. I want you to include an H1 that says gift giver app like this. And then I would like you to create a form, and I'll actually post this right here. Create, number one, create a form that issues a post request. Make sure to have one input named people and have a submit button. Also, as a heads up, make sure that post request has an attribute of action to the results page. It should look like this, as a heads up. Let me wrap this so you can see it. But I would like you to do all of these things really quickly, and also just structure a generic HTML boilerplate with a head, body, and HTML tags. So take about 2 to 3 minutes, do that really quickly, and we'll come back and start writing our application. As people start finishing up what's known as basically the front end, the view of your application, I'm going to go through this rapid fire just really quickly so you can see how it looks. But the first thing you should do is start off with your generic HTML boilerplate. Doc type HTML, put some HTML tags in there, a head tag, a title for gift giver app. Make sure you put a body in there as well, which is where all of the actual stuff in your application is going to go. And once you've taken care of that, we need to make sure that we have a form as well. So go ahead and add yourself a form with an input and a button with a type equals submit. And honestly, I end up doing this so much that at this point, it's become second nature. But for a lot of us, this is going to be something we have to do again and again and again until we get the hang of it. And I also know that some of you will structure your forms a little bit differently. I like to just include a paragraph tag right here and put the input right inside the paragraph tag, so I can say, enter your list of people here separated by a comma. Now, the reason I'm asking them to separate the list of their friends by a comma is because I'm going to use that fact that it's separated by a comma in my logic later on. Now, most of the time you won't know that you need that unless you're very sure of how your application is going to be structured. So don't worry if you weren't aware of that at this point. Just as like a heads up, I'm trying to lead you through my thinking process. And then make sure we name our input, give it a name equals people. Now, the last thing we need to do before we wire up, before our form is finished being wired up, is, bing. Let me make that a colon. And inside our form, we need to give it 2 attributes. Those attributes are the method and the action. In our case, we said action is going to be equal to results and the method is going to be post. And so once I've done this, my generic HTML boilerplate and my form are wired up so that I can start to code out my app MVC style. Before I move on, I want to know if there's any questions. Did anyone miss any of this, or do you want me to paste this into Slack? I would usually at this point go ahead and save the file, grab everything, and just throw it in here so that students who are behind don't feel like they have to keep looking over their friends' shoulders to make sure they know what's going on. This would be the exemplar model. Hey, take a look at this, see how it looks, see if yours is similar. If not, no worries. If it is, fantastique. So there it is. It should be in there. Do we have any questions? Yeah, go for it. Yeah. You'll notice our syntax highlighter having method, action, name, type, all highlighted green. And we're setting an equal sign equal to strings for post, results, people, submit, etc. These are actually attributes on HTML elements. And attributes on HTML elements are pretty generic to HTML, but we can also use them in a Sinatra application when we are sending post requests to our backend, to our application controller right here. And what happens is we're going to need to create a post request to wire up this form here. This post request, which I just say post like this. Does anyone know the route I'm going to send it to, by the way? Yes, Melanie, to results. That's exactly right. So if I'm sending my post request to results, I want to, there we go. I want to put some logic in here that's eventually going to render a new view for our user after they submitted their information. Now, the second we give this input, the attribute name equals people, behind the scenes, what Sinatra does is it creates this params hash for us. Params equals, and then we have this hash, and inside that hash, we should have one key, and that key should be people, which is the name attribute. And then whatever here is going to be the input the user gives us. So just to make sure we have that correct, we can go back into our application and we can say as soon as we submit here, we want to be able to check out our params. So I'm just going to return the params.toS just to see if it works the way we expect it to. Because every post request, it'll generate keys in the params hash corresponding to whatever name attribute we give to our inputs. So in this case, what is the one we have? Name equals what? People. So this is why we should have an attribute in our params hash that says people. And when I do this, let's see exactly what happens when I actually, not that one. When I actually load it up. Let's go ahead and preview our running application. There it is, the gift giver app. That looks pretty good. I'm just going to say, hey there, and just see if it works. And when I submit, I see the params hash, which has one key for people, and it has a string value of hey there. Whatever the user inputs into the input, that's what's going to be attached to the key that we created by giving this input a name. Name equals people. That's what will appear inside our params hash. Does that clarify that a little bit? All right, I think we're finally ready to start playing around with our params. And inside here, you'll notice that we can now post something to a results page and access the params which contain the user's input. So once we have the user's input, we can start to mess with that input or manipulate the data or take that data and do something cool with it. And that is the heart of what an input-output application does. But before we do this, we have now talked about our views, our controller. So what's coming next? The models. So before I go into models, I'm going to stop this video here because this next part is going to get nuts. Y'all ready for this? Oh, yes. All right, I'm going to pause this here and... Okay, we're all ready. Game time. And we'll go into this in a second, okay?